What if everything you thought you knew about your favorite music mogul was a lie? Behind the glamour and power of Sean Diddy Combs lies a web of dark secrets, allegations of sexual blackmail, exploitation, and corruption hidden for decades. As the truth unravels, you'll find yourself questioning not just one man, but an entire industry built on silence and fear. Are you ready to face the chilling reality? Chapter 1. The Rise of Diddy. Sean Diddy Combs was born in the chaos of Harlem, 1969, a world of survival and ambition. He wasn't just shaped by the streets, he learned how to play them. From a young age, Diddy understood one truth: power comes to those who seize it. As a teenager, he hustled his way into Howard University, but college wasn't enough for a man with bigger dreams. He wanted the world, and the world was in New York City's burgeoning hip-hop scene. Harlem gave him grit, but Manhattan offered something more: opportunity. His first real break came in 1990, when he landed an internship at Uptown Records, run by the suave and influential Andre Harrell. Harrell was a gatekeeper, one of the few black executives running a label that controlled New York's hottest acts. If you wanted in the door, you had to impress him, and Diddy did just that. He was relentless, Harrell would later recall in interviews. He would not take no for an answer. Harrell was initially skeptical, but Diddy's energy was impossible to ignore. He was everywhere, running errands, sitting in on recording sessions, learning the business from the ground up. Soon, Combs proved his instincts were sharper than most. In 1991, at just 21, he took on the role of talent director, and it wasn't long before he was credited with shaping the careers of artists like Jodeci and Mary J. Blige. Diddy had an uncanny ability to read the streets, understanding what the youth wanted and how to package it into slick, marketable music. His bold moves began to catch attention, but his ambition came with risk. He pushed the limits at Uptown, and by 1993, he was fired for what Harrell later described as running too fast for the company. But for Diddy, the setback was merely a slingshot. In less than a year, he launched Bad Boy Records, a label that would change the music industry. Armed with a sharp business mind and a visionary approach to hip-hop, he struck gold with his first major signing, Christopher Wallace, better known as the Notorious B.I.G. With Biggie's raw talent and Diddy's marketing genius, they turned hip-hop into a mainstream cultural force. The duo's first major release, Ready to Die, not only put Bad Boy on the map, but made Diddy one of the most sought-after producers in the game. But Diddy wasn't just building a label, he was building an empire. Bad Boy wasn't just about music, it was a brand. Diddy saw the future in lifestyle marketing before anyone else, and he wanted the world to see hip-hop the way he did: glamorous, profitable, and powerful. His signature shiny suit era was born, merging street credibility with high fashion and commercial success. He wasn't just creating hits, he was changing the narrative of what hip-hop could be. Everyone wanted a piece of Bad Boy, from corporate sponsors to the biggest artists of the time. By the mid-90s, Diddy was everywhere, a larger-than-life figure who seemed unstoppable. But behind the flash and fame, darker whispers began to circulate. Rumors of shady business practices followed him, claims that he was squeezing artists out of their money, that he played puppet master with contracts. Then there were the infamous white parties. What started as exclusive, all-white attire events with celebrity guest lists soon became the subject of speculation. Behind the scenes, there were murmurings about what really went on at those lavish events, stories that wouldn't fully come to light until years later. In 1997, tragedy struck when the Notorious B.I.G. was murdered in Los Angeles. The hip-hop world was rocked, and so was Diddy. But instead of retreating, Diddy used the tragedy to push Bad Boy to new heights. His tribute to Biggie, I'll Be Missing You, became a global hit, cementing his status as not just a producer, but a pop culture icon. The song topped the charts, and Diddy rode that wave to unprecedented success. Despite his outward dominance, the darker side of Diddy's empire was quietly festering. Former Bad Boy artists like Maze and The Lox would later come forward, claiming that Diddy manipulated contracts and kept them locked in unfavorable deals. In interviews, Maze accused Diddy of underpaying him while keeping a stranglehold on the rights to his music. The glamorous image of Bad Boy was contrasted by artists' accounts of feeling trapped in exploitative arrangements. The rumors of excess, manipulation, and control grew louder. Industry insiders whispered about the true nature of Diddy's power, alleging that he kept those around him in line with promises of fame and threats of destruction. Some claimed that his infamous white parties weren't just social gatherings, but opportunities for blackmail, where powerful figures engage in behavior that would later be used against them if they ever tried to cross him. These were rumors, yes, but rumors that seemed to circle the music mogul with increasing intensity. Through it all, Diddy remained at the top, unscathed by the controversies swirling around him. He expanded his empire into fashion, liquor, and media, continuing to redefine what it meant to be a hip-hop mogul. But behind the designer suits and high-profile deals, a storm was brewing, one that would finally catch up with him. As Diddy's empire grew, so did the allegations. Sexual misconduct, exploitation, and manipulation were whispered about in corners of the industry, but rarely did anyone dare to speak out publicly. The power Diddy wielded wasn't just financial, it was personal. He knew how to control the narrative, how to silence dissent, and how to keep his public image pristine. But as the years went on, the cracks in the facade started to show. This is where Sean Diddy Combs' story takes its most dramatic turn. The rise was meteoric, but the higher you climb, the harder the fall. Chapter 2: White Parties and the Dark Secrets Behind Them. The air was thick with opulence, the kind of decadent wealth that only comes from unchecked power. Diddy's white parties were the stuff of legend. Every summer, the elite of Hollywood and the music industry descended upon his estate, dressed in pristine white, ready to indulge in what had become the most exclusive social event on the calendar. What seemed like an innocent celebration of status and style masked something far darker, though, an undercurrent of exploitation, manipulation, and fear. The guest list was a who's who of entertainment royalty: actors, models, music executives, and rising stars, all there to rub shoulders with one of the most powerful men in the industry. The press coverage painted a glamorous picture: celebrities laughing by the pool, champagne flowing, and perfectly styled photos splashed across tabloids the next day. But there was another side to these events, one that was never captured by the cameras, hidden from the public eye. Former attendees, speaking years later, described a different atmosphere once the sun set and the public photographers were ushered away. In hushed voices, people began to talk about the second half of Diddy's parties, the part that was strictly off-limits to outsiders. "The night always got darker," said one insider, an ex-employee who had seen more than they were supposed to. Once the cameras were gone, it became about control. Diddy had his circle, and if you were in that circle, you had to play by his rules. For those invited into the inner sanctum, things were no longer about the glitz and glamour. Instead, the parties became a battleground of power dynamics, where submission was rewarded and dissent punished. Witnesses described how Diddy would ensure that guests were loosened up with alcohol and drugs, which were freely available. Some partygoers came willingly, seeking to secure Diddy's favor, knowing that a single introduction could change their career forever. But others weren't there of their own free will, especially the younger guests, some of whom were said to be minors. One model, who spoke anonymously years after the fact, recalled how she and a group of other girls were invited to one such white party under the guise of a networking opportunity. "I was young, maybe 17, and I was just starting out," she remembered. "I thought it was going to be a big break for me, but once I got there, it was clear that it wasn't what I thought. There were a lot of older men, a lot of pressure to drink, and I felt like I couldn't say no." Her story wasn't unique. Several accounts from former attendees have painted a disturbing picture of coercion and manipulation. Diddy, with his larger-than-life persona, always appeared as the orchestrator, maintaining control over everything. Rumors swirled for years that he used these parties to not only manipulate people into compromising situations, but to gather information on them, details that could later be used as leverage if necessary. The whispers of sexual blackmail became a recurring theme, with some claiming that Diddy would film or photograph compromising encounters involving both celebrities and aspiring stars, ensuring their silence. "These parties were like a trap," one former Bad Boy associate recalled. "You thought you were just there to have fun, but then things would take a turn. It was like everyone had to prove their loyalty to Diddy, and if you didn't play along, you were out, sometimes literally out of the industry." The idea that minors were involved in these events is the darkest cloud that hangs over Diddy's white parties. One particularly chilling testimony came from a former event planner who worked on one of the parties in the early 2000s. She recalled seeing girls who looked way too young to be there, escorted by older men who were clearly there for more than just the music and atmosphere. "I didn't say anything at the time," she admitted, guilt heavy in her voice. Everyone knew what was happening, but no one wanted to cross Diddy. He was too powerful. Power was the currency of these gatherings, and Diddy wielded it with precision. His ability to make or break careers kept people in line. Fear of retribution meant that most chose to remain silent, even if they witnessed or experienced troubling behavior. Those who did try to speak out found themselves blackballed from the industry. Careers would mysteriously stall, opportunities would dry up, and their names would be quietly erased from important conversations. Despite the disturbing rumors, Diddy's public image remained largely untarnished for years. His white parties were talked about in the media as glamorous spectacles, with little attention paid to what happened behind the scenes. This wasn't just a reflection of Diddy's power, it was an indictment of the entire entertainment industry, which had a vested interest in keeping its biggest players protected. Hollywood's elite turned a blind eye to the whispers, content to bask in the glow of Diddy's influence while the true cost of his parties remained hidden in the shadows. By the late 2000s, however, cracks in the facade began to appear. A handful of former insiders started to come forward, though most did so anonymously, fearing the consequences. Their stories were consistent: tales of coercion, sexual exploitation, and a pervasive atmosphere of control. As more people began to speak out, a clearer picture of the true nature of these parties started to emerge. But even then, the allegations never stuck. Diddy's empire was too powerful, his influence too far-reaching. The white parties continued, and the darker aspects remained largely buried under layers of wealth, celebrity, and carefully crafted PR. Now, with fresh allegations and Diddy's recent arrest, the floodgates have finally opened. The dark secrets of his white parties, once whispered about in hushed tones, are now at the center of an investigation that could finally expose the full extent of his manipulation. Survivors of these events, many of whom were too afraid to speak before, are now finding the courage to tell their stories. As the investigation unfolds, it seems that the glamorous world Diddy built could unravel at any moment, and the dark truth behind his legendary white parties may finally come to light. The glitz and glamour were always a mirage. Behind the perfect white outfits and the celebrity smiles, something much darker was lurking. Chapter 3: The Shadowy Network, Hollywood Silence. Beneath the glittering lights of Hollywood and the booming bass lines of the music industry lies a web of silence. A carefully crafted system designed to protect the powerful at all costs. For years, Sean Diddy Combs moved through this web with the agility of a man who knew its rules inside and out. Allegations of sexual exploitation, blackmail, and manipulation circulated around him like whispers in the dark, but nothing ever stuck. Why was this? Because he wasn't acting alone. Diddy was part of something much larger, a shadowy network of enablers, from Hollywood executives to fellow celebrities, who made sure the truth stayed buried. Diddy's rise to power didn't happen in isolation. From the beginning, he cultivated alliances with some of the most influential people in entertainment. These connections weren't just business relationships. They were part of an unspoken pact, one that guaranteed silence in exchange for shared benefits. One former music executive, speaking on condition of anonymity, described the inner workings of this pact. "It's like a mafia," he said. "Everyone knew what was going on, but nobody was going to be the one to say it. The moment you speak up, you're finished." The machinery of Hollywood silence wasn't built overnight. It grew over decades, as stars became more powerful and the stakes became higher. Major players in the entertainment industry understood that their careers, along with their wealth and influence, depended on maintaining relationships with key figures like Diddy. They looked the other way when whispers of misconduct surfaced because doing otherwise meant risking their own positions. This code of silence was as old as the industry itself. A chilling example of this came from a former Bad Boy Records insider who had witnessed firsthand how Diddy used his power to control those around him. Diddy had everyone in his pocket, executives, artists, even the media, the insider explained. There were stories about what happened at his parties, about how he treated people, but nobody dared to cross him. If you did, your career was over. This insider, like many others, feared retaliation, understanding that Diddy's influence extended far beyond just the music world. At the heart of this network was an ecosystem of control, where manipulation wasn't just a tactic, it was a currency. If you wanted to succeed in Hollywood or the music industry, you had to play the game. That game often involved keeping your mouth shut about the dark side of fame, whether it was the exploitation happening behind closed doors or the powerful men who used their wealth to cover up their actions. Diddy wasn't the only one, the former executive noted. He was just better at it. He knew how to leverage people's secrets and fears to his advantage. Perhaps one of the most damning examples of Hollywood's complicity was the way the entertainment press handled Diddy's white parties. For years, these events were portrayed as glamorous gatherings of the elite, where celebrities mingled in their finest white attire. But behind the scenes, the truth was far more sinister. Several former partygoers have since come forward to describe how the media was complicit in covering up what really went on. Reporters were invited to the early part of the night, one witness explained. They get their pictures and leave before things got ugly. The real party started when the cameras left. This wasn't accidental. Powerful publicists, studio heads, and record label executives worked together to maintain the facade. They controlled the narrative, ensuring that Diddy's image remained squeaky clean, even as the rumors of exploitation and manipulation grew louder. It was all about protecting the brand, said another former industry insider. Diddy was making people too much money for anyone to care about what was really happening. The culture of silence wasn't just about protecting profits. It was also about protecting reputations. Some of the most prominent names in entertainment were regulars at Diddy's parties, and they had a vested interest in keeping things quiet. As stories of sexual misconduct and blackmail began to emerge, it became clear that many of these figures had either participated in or witnessed the alleged abuses. For them, speaking out wasn't an option. Doing so would mean implicating themselves. One whistleblower, a former assistant to a high-ranking music executive, recalled how she was told to keep her mouth shut after witnessing disturbing behavior at one of Diddy's private gatherings. "I saw things I'll never forget," she said, her voice trembling. There were underage girls being passed around like props. Everyone in that room knew what was happening, but no one said a word. We were all too scared. Diddy had dirt on so many people, he could ruin anyone's career with a phone call. This atmosphere of fear was pervasive. Diddy's empire wasn't just built on hits and flashy parties. It was built on control. The former assistant described how rumors of Diddy using blackmail to silence both women and business rivals were common knowledge within certain circles. He had this ability to make people do whatever he wanted because they knew he had leverage over them. Whether it was something that happened at one of his parties or a deal gone wrong, he always had something on someone. But Diddy's methods weren't unique. His tactics were part of a larger system in Hollywood and the music industry, where powerful men used manipulation, coercion, and fear to maintain their dominance. In this world, silence was currency, and speaking out meant losing everything. For years, the industry kept its dirty secrets hidden, protecting its most valuable players while leaving victims to suffer in the shadows. Despite the growing allegations against Diddy, his network of enablers remained intact. Even as former associates began to speak out, the system that had protected him for so long continued to function. High-profile friends and business partners defended him, downplaying the accusations or dismissing them altogether. "It's just part of the game," one veteran music executive shrugged when asked about the rumors. "Everyone has skeletons in their closet. Diddy just knows how to keep his locked up tighter than most." Yet as the walls around Diddy's empire began to crack, it became harder to ignore the truth. The shadowy network of power that had protected him for so long was finally starting to unravel. Whistleblowers were stepping forward, survivors were finding their voices, and the machinery of silence that had kept Diddy untouchable for decades was no longer as impenetrable as it once seemed. The Hollywood dream Diddy had helped build was now crumbling, revealing the dark, rotting foundation beneath. And as more stories emerged, It became clear that Diddy's downfall wasn't just about him. It was about an entire industry that had looked the other way for far too long. The silence was breaking, and with it, the grip of fear that had once kept the truth at bay. Chapter 4: Allegations of Sexual Blackmail. The whispers began quietly, like background noise at one of Diddy's infamous parties, where music pounded and champagne flowed. But underneath the glamour, behind the smiles and laughter, there was another story being told, a much darker one. It was about control, manipulation, and the twisted power Diddy allegedly held over the people in his orbit. And at the center of it all was the chilling accusation that Diddy didn't just leverage wealth and fame to maintain his empire. He used sexual blackmail. For years, the rumors circulated that behind the scenes of the glitzy parties, the luxurious vacations, and the high-powered deals, Diddy kept a vault of secrets. Not financial secrets, but intimate, compromising details about the personal lives of the people around him. Former associates, rising stars, and even celebrities found themselves ensnared in situations that could easily ruin careers, and Diddy was said to have documented everything. One of the most striking accounts came from a former music executive who spoke under condition of anonymity. You have to understand the kind of influence Diddy had, not just over his artists, but over everyone, the executive said. If you were in his circle, there were always rumors about him collecting information, personal, sexual, things that could destroy you if they ever got out. It wasn't just about money with him. It was about control. He had to be the one holding all the cards. This executive recounted how Diddy allegedly orchestrated scenarios at his parties where guests would be encouraged to drink heavily, indulge in drugs, and engage in sexual activity, often without fully understanding the consequences of what they were walking into. It was always the same formula, the source explained. You're having fun, the music is loud, the drinks keep coming, and before you know it, you're in a room with people you don't know, and someone's got a camera. That's how it started for a lot of people. One particular case stands out. A young artist who found himself caught in a compromising situation during one of Diddy's infamous after-parties. "I was just trying to get my foot in the door," he later confessed to a friend. Diddy was a god in the industry. He could make you or break you, and everyone knew it. So when I got invited to one of his private parties, I thought it was my big break. But what started as a night of celebration quickly turned into something else. They gave me a drink, then another, he remembered. The next thing I knew, I was in a back room with a couple of other people, and there were cameras. I don't remember much, but I remember the feeling the next morning, like something terrible had happened. He wouldn't say much more, but his silence in the years that followed spoke volumes. Friends noticed how his career took off soon after, but also how he became a shadow of his former self, always looking over his shoulder, never quite at ease. This was not an isolated incident. Several others who had been close to Diddy spoke of similar experiences, instances where they, or others they knew, found themselves in compromising situations that seemed carefully orchestrated. And in many of these stories, cameras and recording devices were often mentioned, always lurking in the background, capturing moments that could later be used as leverage. Diddy knew how to control people, said another former associate. He didn't just control your career, he controlled your secrets. He'd invite you to these parties, make you feel like you were part of something exclusive, and then, once you let your guard down, he'd make sure you were in a situation you couldn't walk away from. The power of sexual blackmail wasn't just in what was recorded, it was in the threat of what could happen if those recordings ever got out. Diddy's alleged vault of secrets became an open secret within his circle. Everyone knew, said a former Bad Boy Records artist. You'd hear stories about so-and-so, who messed with Diddy and then disappeared. Not literally, but their career would disappear. They'd stop getting calls, stop getting invited to things. That was the fear he used to keep people in line. Rumors suggest that Diddy's extensive recordings and tapes of high-profile individuals in compromising situations piqued the interest of intelligence agencies, including a certain foreign entity, which allegedly saw value in the material as leverage in political circles. Diddy's connections and the potential access to sensitive information reportedly granted him influence beyond entertainment, hinting at a broader political power fueled by hidden alliances and a collection of secrets that extended his reach into arenas far removed from the music world. Some who found themselves under Diddy's thumb tried to fight back, But the system that protected him was too vast, too powerful. One high-profile entertainment lawyer, who had briefly represented an artist with ties to Diddy, recalled a meeting where the artist was on the verge of breaking down. "He came to me in a panic," the lawyer said. "He was terrified. He told me there was something out there, something Diddy had on him, and that if it ever got out, he'd lose everything." He didn't go into detail, but the fear in his eyes said it all. What made Diddy's alleged use of sexual blackmail so insidious was how it was woven into the very fabric of the industry. It wasn't just a tool for controlling artists or rivals. It was also a method for keeping Hollywood's most powerful figures in line. A former publicist, who had once worked for some of the biggest names in entertainment, claimed that Diddy's influence stretched far beyond the music world. He had dirt on so many people, people in film, people in politics even. He knew things that could ruin lives, and that's why no one ever crossed him. One chilling example involved a high-profile actor who had been a fixture at Diddy's parties. Everyone knew this guy was into some dark stuff, the publicist said. And everyone knew Diddy had the receipts. But nobody ever said anything, because they knew if they did, they'd be next. As these stories began to surface, the scope of Diddy's alleged blackmail network came into focus. It wasn't just about the parties, the drugs, or the sex. It was about the culture of fear he had cultivated. The whispers of blackmail were always there, hanging over the industry like a dark cloud. Yet, few dared to speak openly about it, fearing the consequences of crossing a man who had mastered the art of silence and manipulation. For years, Diddy's public image remained carefully crafted, shielded by his charisma, influence, and undeniable success. But behind the facade, a darker reality was taking shape, one that relied on secrets, lies, and the power of blackmail to keep it all intact. And as more people began to step forward with their stories, the full extent of his alleged control was finally starting to unravel. The rumors of sexual blackmail were no longer just whispers. They were becoming a chorus of voices, survivors, witnesses, and insiders, each revealing a piece of the puzzle that painted a damning picture of how Diddy's empire was truly built. The house of cards was beginning to fall, and with it, the myth of untouchability that had protected him for so long. Chapter 5: Dark Rumors and the Music Industry's Dirty Deals. The music industry has always had its fair share of dark rumors, whispered in corridors and behind closed doors. But behind the platinum records and chart-topping hits, a shadowy network of power and exploitation flourished. As Diddy's empire grew, so too did the whispers about his behavior. But those whispers didn't stop with him. This chapter delves into how Diddy's alleged predatory actions fit into a much larger pattern of corruption within the industry, a world where power wasn't just wielded to create stars, but to control and exploit those who dared to get too close. For years, insiders in the music business spoke of a toxic culture where abuse and manipulation were par for the course. Behind the glamour and excess lay a reality few ever talked about openly, until recently. Several former executives, artists, and employees have since come forward, painting a damning picture of an industry that thrived on exploiting the vulnerable while protecting the powerful. One former executive, who had worked with major labels for over 2 decades, described the music industry as a playground for predators. He explained, "It was an open secret that if you had power, if you controlled the money, the deals, the talent, you could do anything. People were disposable, especially the young artists just trying to make a name for themselves. If you weren't careful, you'd end up being someone's pawn." It was in this world that Diddy allegedly thrived, building an empire that was more than just about music. He wasn't the first, and he certainly wasn't the last, but what set him apart was how long he managed to escape real scrutiny. While other powerful figures in the industry faced public accusations or scandals, Diddy remained largely untouchable for years. Many have speculated that his influence wasn't just based on his talent or business acumen, but on something much darker, his ability to keep people silent through fear and control. A former Bad Boy Records employee, who worked closely with Diddy during the height of his career, offered a glimpse into how that control worked. "He had this aura of invincibility," she said. "People would say, 'He knows too much. He has too much dirt on people.' If you were at one of his parties or in his circle, you knew there was a line you didn't cross. If you did, you'd either be cut off completely or worse. He'd make sure you never worked in the industry again. This employee recalled how Diddy allegedly used his position of power to manipulate not only the careers of his artists, but their personal lives. There were a lot of young, vulnerable people around him, aspiring musicians, models, even actors. He'd offer them the world, make them feel like they were part of something exclusive, and then suddenly, they'd find themselves in situations they couldn't get out of. It wasn't just about money or fame anymore. It was about control. And once you were in, it was almost impossible to get out. These dark rumors were not unique to Diddy, however. The music industry has long been plagued by stories of predatory behavior by some of its most powerful figures. In the late 1990s and early 2000s, several high-profile executives were quietly accused of sexual misconduct, with claims that they had used their power to take advantage of young artists. Many of these accusations never saw the light of day, as the victims were often paid off or threatened into silence. One particularly notorious example involved a top record executive who was rumored to have held parties similar to Diddy's infamous white parties. According to multiple sources, these gatherings were exclusive, invitation-only events where anything could happen, and frequently did. Attendees would be plied with drugs and alcohol, and many of them would later claim they were coerced into compromising situations. But like so many others, these claims were buried under layers of NDAs and legal threats. Another former artist, who had worked with several major labels in the 2000s, spoke about the dirty deals that were commonplace. If you were young and attractive, there was always this undercurrent of expectation. I can't tell you how many times I was told, if you want to make it, you've got to play the game. And that game wasn't just about the music. It was about what you were willing to do behind closed doors. She recalled hearing about Diddy's reputation long before she ever met him. People warned me about him. They said he had this way of trapping people, making them think they owed him something. And if you crossed him or tried to leave, he'd find a way to make sure you regretted it. The deeper one digs into the music industry's history, the more apparent it becomes that Diddy's alleged behavior wasn't an anomaly. It was symptomatic of a much larger problem. Power, fame, and money created an environment where the powerful could act with impunity, knowing that the system would protect them. Executives, managers, publicists, many were complicit, either turning a blind eye or actively helping to cover up the abuses that took place. Everyone knew what was going on, said another former music executive. It wasn't just Diddy. There were a lot of people doing the same things, using their power to exploit others, to keep them in line. But no one wanted to talk about it because the music industry is built on connections. If you speak out, you're done. Your career is over. One of the most infamous examples of this industry-wide complicity came in the early 2000s, when a group of young female artists attempted to sue a major label for sexual harassment and exploitation. Despite the gravity of the accusations, the case was settled out of court, and the story was buried. It was a perfect example of how the system worked, a former label executive explained. The label didn't want the bad press. The artists were too scared to keep fighting, and in the end, nothing changed. The people in power stayed in power. It's within this broader context that Diddy's alleged actions must be viewed. He wasn't acting in a vacuum. The music industry, with its deeply entrenched power dynamics, provided the perfect cover for those who knew how to exploit it. For years, Diddy's success allowed him to evade scrutiny, as the same system that made him a star also protected him from the consequences of his alleged behavior. As more stories come to light, the picture that emerges is one of an industry where the lines between fame, power, and exploitation have always been blurred. Diddy's alleged predatory behavior may be one of the most high-profile examples, but it is far from the only one. His story is just the tip of an iceberg, a glimpse into the dark side of the music business, where dirty deals and dark rumors are as much a part of the landscape as the music itself. Chapter 6: The Arrest and the Fallout. It was a moment that shook the entertainment world to its core. On the morning of October 27, 2024, the news broke. Sean Diddy Combs, one of the most powerful figures in the music industry, had been arrested. For decades, he had been a towering figure, untouchable in his fame and influence. But the arrest marked the first time that the whispers of predatory behavior, coercion, and corruption were laid bare for the world to see. The charges against him were explosive. Diddy faced a litany of accusations, ranging from sexual misconduct to blackmail and exploitation of minors. The arrest followed a months-long investigation, sparked by a wave of survivors and whistleblowers who had finally broken their silence. As the details emerged, it became clear that the police had been quietly building a case for some time. The arrest was no publicity stunt. It was the culmination of years of secretive legal maneuvers and undercover investigations. Law enforcement sources revealed that Diddy had been under surveillance for months, his lavish lifestyle no longer just the subject of tabloid gossip, but of intense scrutiny by a dedicated team of investigators. Detectives had combed through years of allegations, reviewing old police reports, interviewing past employees, and tracking down individuals who had long since disappeared from the public eye. The police believed they had enough to charge Diddy not just with individual instances of misconduct, but with orchestrating a pattern of abuse spanning years. As the media frenzy erupted, details of the case began to leak to the public. Court documents painted a chilling picture of manipulation, where fame, money, and power had allegedly been used to control and exploit the vulnerable. The charges included multiple counts of sexual assault, exploitation of minors, and the use of blackmail to silence victims. Among the most shocking allegations were claims that Diddy had leveraged his infamous white parties as a cover for darker, more sinister activities. Witnesses claimed that behind the glamour of these events lay a hidden world of coercion, where young women and men were allegedly manipulated into compromising situations, with their reputations and careers hanging in the balance. One witness, a former Bad Boy Records employee who had worked closely with Diddy for years, recounted how she had seen the warning signs early on but had been too afraid to speak out. There was always this atmosphere of fear, she told investigators. People knew things, but no one wanted to say anything because they knew what would happen. Diddy wasn't just powerful, he was dangerous. He knew how to make people disappear, not literally, but professionally. You'd be blacklisted in an instant. The media quickly latched onto the spectacle. News outlets ran 24-hour coverage of the unfolding scandal, with reporters camped outside Diddy's mansion, waiting for any sign of movement. Talk shows debated the fall of the music mogul, and social media was ablaze with speculation, shock, and outrage. For many, Diddy's arrest was the long-awaited reckoning for a man whose public persona had long masked a darker private life. Amid the storm, several survivors stepped forward to share their stories publicly for the first time. One woman, who had been an aspiring singer in the late 1990s, recounted how Diddy had lured her into his circle with promises of stardom, only to later subject her to years of manipulation and abuse. Her testimony, along with several others, became a focal point of the case. "He controlled everything," she said in an emotional interview. "He made me believe I needed him, that my career would be nothing without him. And when I tried to leave, he made sure I knew I'd never work in the industry again." Their courage in coming forward became a rallying cry for others who had been silenced for years. Whistleblowers, many of them former employees or close associates of Diddy, provided critical information to law enforcement. One anonymous source, described in the press as a former insider at Bad Boy Records, claimed that Diddy had meticulously covered his tracks for years, using his wealth and connections to keep people quiet. He had files on people, the source alleged. He knew their secrets, and if you crossed him, he wasn't afraid to use them against you. As more details emerged, it became clear that Diddy had allegedly built an empire, not just on his talent, but on fear and control. In the court of public opinion, Diddy's image was unraveling faster than anyone could have predicted. Longtime collaborators and industry insiders began distancing themselves, issuing carefully worded statements that expressed support for the victims while avoiding direct condemnation. But the damage was done. His name, once synonymous with success, was now a symbol of betrayal. The legal case against Diddy was moving forward at a breakneck pace. Prosecutors, emboldened by the overwhelming amount of evidence and testimony, were preparing to build a case that could bring down one of the most powerful men in the industry. Court documents revealed that several high-profile figures from the music world were expected to testify, some reluctantly, and others as part of their own deals with prosecutors. Meanwhile, the fallout continued to ripple through Hollywood and the music industry. Rumors swirled that more arrests could follow, as investigators widened their scope to look at other powerful figures who may have been complicit in the abuse or helped to cover it up. Diddy's fall was just the beginning, and those who had once stood in his shadow were now wondering if they might be next. In the midst of the chaos, Diddy's legal team launched a ferocious defense, painting the allegations as nothing more than opportunistic attacks on a man who had achieved unparalleled success. They argued that the media was spinning a false narrative, turning Diddy into a villain without due process. But even as they mounted their defense, the cracks in Diddy's empire were becoming impossible to ignore. Brands were pulling sponsorships, business partners were cutting ties, and the once unshakable mogul found himself increasingly isolated. How much longer can Diddy hold on to his crumbling empire? With each new piece of evidence, with each new survivor story, the walls are closing in. The legal battles ahead promise to be explosive, but for now, one thing is clear: the empire Diddy built on power, manipulation, and fear is collapsing under the weight of the truth. Chapter 7. The people involved. Some theories. In the world of power, privilege, and secrets, Diddy's web stretches far and wide, with a network of allies, enemies, and shadowy figures supposedly shaping and supporting his career. Theories abound on the internet about those who protect his influence, hinting at an interconnected world where music, Hollywood, intelligence, and politics intertwine. From artists who mysteriously vanish from the limelight to moguls with storied reputations for ruthless control, here are the 10 players and theories most commonly linked to Diddy's empire. Clive Davis, the gatekeeper. It all starts with Clive Davis, the legendary music mogul who saw Diddy's potential early and allegedly made sure doors swung wide open for him. Some say Davis groomed Diddy, not just as a protege, but as a player who would bring Davis's brand of ruthless power into hip-hop. Davis, with his connections across both music and Hollywood, is rumored to have given Diddy more than just mentorship. He supposedly handed him the secrets to thrive in an industry that rewards loyalty and punishes dissent. Whispers suggest their bond isn't just about business, but about mutual secrets that bind their fates inextricably together. Jay-Z, the strategic rival. Theories about Diddy and Jay-Z have become a staple online, with some claiming the two moguls have maintained a competitive alliance for years, carefully balancing their influence. Jay-Z's steady rise in music, fashion, and business alongside Diddy hints at a relationship marked by equal parts respect and rivalry. Conspiracy theorists speculate that the two hold enough secrets on each other to prevent either from rising too far or falling too low. From Rock Nation to Bad Boy, the artists and executives tied to both moguls are said to know there's an unspoken rule: loyalty keeps you safe, but betrayal can end careers. Harvey Weinstein, the dark connection. The disgraced Hollywood mogul Harvey Weinstein is a name that frequently surfaces alongside Diddy's, with theories suggesting they were part of the same power circle, one that protected its own at any cost. Some allege that Diddy took cues from Weinstein on managing his empire through carefully constructed power moves and legal maneuvers. They reportedly shared contacts in Hollywood who ensured that issues were kept under wraps. The recent downfall of Weinstein prompted many online to wonder if Diddy, too, would face scrutiny someday, or if his power ran too deep to suffer the same fate. Donald Trump, the political bond. Diddy and Trump's public friendship has fueled speculations that extend far beyond mere business associations. Rumors claim that Diddy's involvement with Trump wasn't just for appearances, but a strategic alignment granting him access to political power. Some go as far as to suggest that Diddy has used his reach to gain leverage within political circles, influencing people who might have otherwise come after him. Whether real or not, the speculated influence was reportedly reciprocal. Trump gained access to a world of high-profile musicians, and Diddy gained political cover. Jimmy Iovine, the mastermind. Interscope Records co-founder Jimmy Iovine is another figure rumored to be pivotal in Diddy's rise. Conspiracy theorists argue that Iovine, a well-connected industry insider, taught Diddy how to shape public narratives and manage crises behind the scenes. Iovine's collaborations with Diddy's network allegedly go beyond typical business dealings, involving a careful exchange of resources and influence. Some speculate Iovine helped Diddy build a network that extended beyond music into areas of finance and media, all tied together in an untouchable web of connections. The blackmail files, alleged tapes, and leverage. Perhaps the most incendiary theory is the rumored existence of tapes, recordings of high-profile figures allegedly caught in compromising situations during Diddy's infamous white parties and exclusive events. Stories of celebrities, executives, and politicians at these gatherings abound, with some theories claiming Diddy has used these recordings as blackmail to ensure silence or loyalty. The power of these rumored tapes is purported to stretch across both coasts, giving him control over some of the most famous names in the world. Some allege he's even shared select footage with intelligence agencies, both foreign and domestic, adding a dangerous new layer to his reach. CIA and foreign intelligence rumors. Diddy's supposed connections with intelligence circles, both national and foreign, are a conspiracy theory staple. Some suggest that his influence within the industry makes him an asset of interest to intelligence agencies who might see value in his leverage over global elites. According to these theories, Diddy's information empire and access to high-level figures could allow him to influence those in politics, business, and entertainment, possibly even keeping tabs on foreign entities in exchange for protection from scrutiny in the U.S. Beyoncé's silent role. Though they're rarely seen together, Beyoncé is another figure often linked to Diddy through her marriage to Jay-Z, with internet theories implying a tacit partnership. Conspiracies suggest that Beyoncé's quiet power acts as a shield for Diddy, keeping a public spotlight that might otherwise catch him. Allegedly, Beyoncé and Jay-Z's influence has allowed them to pull focus, shielding their associates and friends from scandals that might otherwise be exposed. Some theorists claim that when Beyoncé rises, so does Diddy, both benefit by redirecting the media spotlight. The East Coast-West Coast feud, puppet strings and sacrifices. The rivalry between East Coast and West Coast rap has been scrutinized for decades, and theories still abound over Diddy's alleged role in escalating the feud. The deaths of Tupac Shakur and Biggie Smalls have often been framed as the result of a rivalry allegedly fueled by Diddy and Death Row record Suge Knight. Some theories assert that the feud's escalation was part of a larger plan to cement Bad Boy's power, with Biggie's tragic death providing a martyrdom that elevated the brand. This dark chapter in hip-hop, theorists argue, is tied to Diddy's ambition to control the scene. Whether these theories hold truth or are the creations of a fascinated public, they all create an image of Diddy as a figure whose power used to go far beyond music, extending through a network that shields him, just as it benefits those within it. The people and the whispers surrounding him hint at a world where fame, influence, and fear create a formidable, secretive empire.